1 out of 5 high school students are using e-cigarettes, which is why we're here, again. Truth Initiative has partnered with EverFi to create a free, comprehensive digital program to combat vaping. Our innovative, interactive curriculum is presented in an honest, authentic peer-to-peer style. A new generation is at risk for nicotine addiction. We have the tools to stop it, again.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We are so excited to have you here for our webinar, Teen Vaping Epidemic, Tools and Strategies to Use in Your Classroom. I'm your host, Lauren Pingle, and I'm so happy to welcome our guest speaker, Amy Taylor of the Truth Initiative. Amy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Lauren. I'm really excited to be here to talk about our new curriculum. I'm just going to jump right in. So who are we? Who is Truth Initiative? We are the largest nonprofit public health organization really dedicated to a future where nicotine addiction and tobacco addiction are a thing of the past. And so what we do is we spread, seek, and speak the truth around vaping, around cigarette smoking, and we do that primarily through our Truth campaign, where we talk to young people through ads either on TV or digitally. We have been around for 20 years, which has been incredible. But just in a span of 3 years between 2015 and 2018, we were able to track that we prevented 2.5 million young people from becoming smokers. And when the organization began in the late 90s, early 2000s, right, the youth smoking rate was at 22.6%, which is an epidemic. And now we know through science, through the work that Truth Initiative does, through policy changes, the youth smoking rate now is below 4%, which is incredible. But knowing that, we have to deal with the vaping epidemic. And so how do we do that? Again, I said, we have our National Truth campaign. These are the ads that your students are seeing on their devices, on YouTube, on television. It is our public education prevention campaign, which right now is primarily focused on anti-vaping messages. We also have a very robust research and evaluation team who tracks all the work that we're doing so that we know that we're changing knowledge, attitudes, and beliefs, which then impact behavior. So that, as you saw in that chart with the smoking graph, that we were able to pinpoint that we prevented 2.5 million young people from started smoking. We're also tracking that for vaping as well. I think the beauty of our organization is that we also have, and I'll talk more about this later, the first ever youth vaping cessation program aimed not just at young adults, but also at teenagers as well. And the work that I do and my team does is actually on the ground, working with young activists to get them to be ambassadors around vaping and anti-smoking, but also to provide resources to community members like you on the ground to help spread our messages. And so the Truth campaign. So what do you mean? What do you mean by a public education prevention campaign? So who are we and what do we do? Our Truth campaign is primarily focused on talking to 15 to 24-year-olds, so young people. And the brand and our messaging, what we are not, we do not finger wag. We are not angry. We are not condescending. We are not silly. What we do is that we are youth-led. We are approachable. We are clever. And we try to talk to young people by providing them the facts that they need to know to make responsible decisions. So that's really the tone. We do not ever say, we say all the time that we love the smoker, but we hate smoking. So that's really the tack that we're taking as we talk to young people.
stagione.
Okay, bye.
So that gives you a good sense of the kind of message and the tone that the campaign brings to young people. So that was really one of our first forays into messaging to young people about this issue. And so let's talk a little bit about the epidemic before we talk about our curriculum. So this data is a little bit old, but earlier this year, we saw that the youth vaping rate was at 27.5%, which is higher than it really ever was when we were created for smoking, right? This is epidemic proportions. Now we're down to 19.5%, but that's still at epidemic levels. New research will be coming out later this month, which may show an uptick in their data about the number of young people who are vaping. But I think a very interesting fact, an important fact, is that 40% of young people are vaping regularly. And that is an incredible problem. And I know that many of you have seen that. And what we also know is that the nicotine content in e-cigarettes has doubled just in the last couple of years. So when vaping devices with nicotine juice were first introduced in 2013, the nicotine level was about 2.1%, which is really what the nicotine level is in your average cigarette. Now we're seeing it's as high as 4.3%. And frankly, we don't even really know what's in many of these vapes. So it could even be higher. And so what we're seeing is that when young people are vaping, they're getting addicted quicker, right? Because there's more nicotine in the products than there are in cigarettes. And what we are also finding is that those young people who are vaping and this is through our research department, young people who are vaping are 7 times more likely to start smoking cigarettes. And so that makes sense, right? If the nicotine levels are higher in their vapes, that they're just trying to find nicotine any way they can. So it's a big concern. We're also concerned that vapes could lead young people to smoking combustible cigarettes. And so what we've seen is really a growth of disposable flavored e-cigarettes. There is a loophole in some of the regulations that allows these disposable products to provide vapes in these fruity flavors, right? Watermelon, bubble gum, that are are so attractive to young people. And we've seen 1,000% increase in these disposable products. Also, these disposable devices are so much cheaper. Many of you may be familiar with Juuls. Juuling has become synonymous with vaping, right? But Juuls can be expensive, and they have taken many of their flavored products, not all of them, but many of their flavored products off the shelves for now, although we think they'll come back. But these disposable devices are so much cheaper than Juuls are, and so that we're seeing an increase of interest amongst young people in these products.
I just want to touch on some of the things that, as a former teacher, I know there are the questions that I'd be asking. So the grade level is 8th grade through 12th grade. So if you're a 7th grade teacher right now and you're sitting in the audience and you know that your students need this and have the capacity to access it, kind of thing. Maybe you know that their reading levels are at par, that they can access it. I'm not going to tell you you can't have access to this program because you are the master of your classroom, So just be aware of that. It does align to national health education standards, and our suggested class fit would be like a health class, like a FACS class, a PE class, or really an advisory class. I think that I could see this as something that you're using school-wide in 8th grade, in 9th grade, repeated in 10th grade, like get that information in there and really get those at-bats for students so that they understand what this is and the dangers that there are. It is online. It is web-based. So there's nothing to download. You're going to go to a site. Kids will go to a site, they'll log in and they'll get started. It's really quick and easy that way. There are pre and post assessments built into every single lesson. So you'll see for all 4 lessons, there's a pre-assessment and a post-assessment. And that we include because for a couple of reasons. First of all, sometimes you just have to assign grades to certain topics, like you have to cover vaping in your classroom and you want to be able to have like an actual grade. Also, it's great if you are able to just monitor kids' progress as they're going through it. Like, did they go through all 4 lessons? But you can also see the knowledge gain. So if they got a 40% on the pre-assessment and a 70% on the post-assessment, maybe it's not at 100, but that's a big gain, from not knowing much at all to knowing a good chunk more after they've taken the lesson. And then the other thing that I really wanted to mention here is there are games in each of the lessons that I just really wanted to highlight. So they do a bunch of the learning, kind of get some of the vocabulary, and then they get to a game. And what it is they're presented with a fact, or they're presented with a statement. And they have to decide if that statement is true or false with a thumbs up or thumbs down. And they're trying to get a streak of how many true statements that they can identify. So it has that sort of gamified competitive aspect in it. But you'll notice the first time kids go through it, they're probably going to be like, what's that word? I don't know what that is. Did I miss it? And they might get it wrong. And that's okay, because then they get feedback saying, nope, that was incorrect. Move on to the next one. They can try again right away, or they can read the facts and move on. But that game and a varied problem set of those questions is repeated in each of the lessons so that by the time they get to that last lesson, they're going to have seen that question they got wrong another time. And they'll probably get it right the second time. So it's really just pushes that reinforcement of learning of these very, heavy, like scientific words and concepts and facts that they just might struggle with if it was just a one-time exposure.
Yeah. And I think what's great about it too, Lauren, I think you hit the nail on the head, is that we do try to make it fun, right? Like how we keep the student paying attention? How do we reinforce the key facts? And I think that we've created a clever way of doing that.
Agreed. Yep. All right. So then I want to tell you, just based on the fact that I've worked with teachers, I've been a teacher, I've worked with teachers across North America for several years. Here are some ideas that I see for how teachers are using any EverFi resource in their classroom, including Vaping Know the Truth. So you can use it as an extension activity. So say you have core instruction around vaping prevention, or just like health class, information. And then you can actually have them go on this as the extension, maybe after you've done your direct instruction. You can use it as a class discussion. So I've seen people use EverFi lessons in hybrid settings where that they're going to have the kids, at home do the EverFi lesson, and then they'll come back in for the class discussion, or they'll do the whole thing via a Google Doc, or they'll do the whole thing via a Zoom meeting kind of thing. So it's really up to you and up to your situation right now. Again, similarly, that flipped classroom model where kids might be working at home and they come back in and talk to you, that's that flipped classroom again. And then the small groups. When I was teaching, used EverFi in my classroom, a different course. But what I would do, because we were obviously in person, we weren't in the middle of a pandemic, I would have all of my students on EverFi. And then I would either pull individuals for interventions conferencing or small groups for conferencing, because it is engaging and kids are going to be, more locked into that computer than on other programs from what my experience is. So I was able to have them occupied so that I could pull the small groups for different sort of interventions as well.
Yeah, and our teacher resources guide gives great additional, instead of just using the curriculum, ideas and how you can engage your classroom around discussions of this topic too. So in addition to this, for the students, you should check out the teacher discussion and resources guides as well. They're wonderful.
Yep. And that, once you create an account, will be on the resources button on your dashboard. And perfect segue, here's how you create an account. So if you're like Andrew and you already have an account, you can just log in to everfi.com/login and click the add a course button. It has a little plus sign in the upper left-hand corner. Find Vaping Know the Truth and just add it to your dashboard. If you're new to EverFi, you'll just go to everfi.com/new teacher, find your state, find your school, select Vaping Know the Truth. Just complete your teacher profile. It's quick and easy. And then you'll be on and ready to get started to create your classes. And the other thing that I'll mention here is that we have schools managers across the entire country and Canada, everywhere basically, that can help you out. They're local to your region. If you create your teacher account and you want some more help or more information, under the support tab is where you can find your local contacts information.